Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'll tell you one thing. It's a message that I've heard, well, for the last at least 10 years. I think it's basically entrenched in our society. You work hard, you get a job, and then you get a house. Ownership of a house is, and for a while, for a very long time actually, has been, a symbol of status, a symbol of security, a symbol of independence. But I think with the way that both the housing market and, well, the jobs market is right now, are people in our younger generation reconsidering this? And also, why do others really focus on this point? Now, if we're looking at this very objectively, I understand the obvious reasons. You don't want to have bills, you want to own the land that you live on. Who doesn't? I would. It'd make things way, way easier, right? You've got no troubles then, you've got a lot more rights as well. It can be a big benefit. But whilst that's all true, and whilst I am definitely someone who agrees with prioritising the more important things in life, I'd much more understand why someone would buy a very expensive house than buy a very expensive car. If it was a choice between the two, it makes a lot more sense to buy the house. But when we're talking about buying houses, we're not really talking about that, are we? In city centres here in the UK, apartments, flats, go for about upwards of 100k. It's not uncommon to see that. You will get some that are cheaper. Obviously, I can't speak for every single city in the country, but it's not uncommon to see in the bigger cities especially 1, 2, 300k for an apartment. That's not actually that amazing. I think houses almost everywhere are going to be over 200k, maybe even over 300 or 400 in some places. Obviously it depends on the location, but none of it is very cheap. Actually, it's all very expensive. And because prices are so very high and wages are comparatively quite low, there's not the option to purchase up front for most people. And by the way, that makes sense. I think a lot of people sometimes get confused by the way that I speak, in the sense that I might say something like, oh, houses are so expensive, and then I'll get someone in the comment section like, well, you think you'll be able to pay off a lifetime's asset, something that you'll use forever, with the wage of a year? No, I don't think that. I don't think that at all. But especially when we look comparatively to salaries of the past, houses are expensive, right? Very expensive. Now, the initial saviour was the concept of something like a mortgage, right? So you get a bit of money together for a deposit, you put your money down, and then you pay the rest in monthly or in some set term installments, right? You work it out with whoever your mortgage is with, but that's the concept of how you purchase property. You enter a contract where you pay off the price and it gets bought out initially by someone else. An interesting concept and one that works. There's normally a bit of interest on top, obviously, because, well, if someone's lending you upwards of 100k capital, I completely understand why they want to get a good cut of that, over the years. But that seems to be something that's increasingly off the table for a lot of people, especially the younger people. And I don't even mean as young as myself, even older. I do think it's understandable, but before you even think about applying yourself for a mortgage, you've got to meet the, criteria to say you can afford this. You've also got to get yourself a deposit, money to put down on a mortgage. With the house prices the way they are, what are you going to put down? There's options to maybe put 1% down, I've seen that before, but a lot of them are, 7% down, 10%, 15, 20%. That's where you get to a point where a lot of people are going to struggle to even save that much up. And even if they do, it's going to take them a long time, which is going to leave them renting for a long time. And also on top of that, because prices are so high, it's very, very difficult for them to even keep up with the monthly payments. I do think one of the consequences, or potentially solutions, depending on how you see it, to this problem is increasing the terms and potentially even decreasing the upfront payments, for reasons which I'll talk about in a minute. But the point is, I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% down, but also another way that I've seen it become more affordable is by increasing the term. Not normally by a long way, right? It's already 25 years. What's next? 35 years? 45 years? At that point, is it actually worth it? For a good number of people, owning a property or having the aspiration to own one is something that's becoming off the table. It's just too affordable. Too unaffordable, I should say. It's too unaffordable. How are they going to get together the down payments with the cost being so high to just live a normal life? How are they going to be able to keep up with the payments, and how long is it going to take to pay that off? When you're paying upwards of 20, 30, 40 years for a product, is it worth the supposed security that it gives? And people say, well, yeah, it's worth it to own a house. Well, you only own that house after 40 years, or 30 years, or 20 years, even if it's just an average 20 to 25 year term, right? That's when you own the house. And we could make the argument for paying it down faster. There's definitely something to be said for that. And for some people, it can work, right? I'm not saying that it's a terrible idea, but I am saying that there are benefits and drawbacks, I think. So just going off of the average example of 20 plus years, what level of security and freedom does that actually grant you? Because if you've got a mortgage to pay off for the next 10, 15, 20 years, what can you do, right? You've got to make sure you keep up with those payments, so that might limit your ability to quit a job or try a different path. It's going to mean that you're going to have to keep up with a set amount of work, which is fine if it gets you the result that you want. But for a lot of people, I think they are now questioning whether that's worth it, because, again, it also gives you one potential issue, especially in modern times, of location. Being set in a location. You could argue that's location stability, but it could also be a potential worrying issue too. I mean, I've seen examples even in my city where a market that might have been decent 10, 15 years ago, the houses there are actually going down in value. Now, that's not going to be true for the majority of the country, right? Most house prices go up, and you could argue that is a good way to store away some money and maybe even make some money for retirement. But it seems to be the only way that's taught to people, right? You get a job, you get a mortgage. I've said it before, I'm age 20 at the minute, and even at this age, I've got friends who are working hard to stack away money to get a mortgage, which is nice, which is fine. But when you get that, because you've had to save so much anyway, and because realistically it is out of your price range, what happens when it comes to paying that off? Are you really going to work like this for the next 20 years plus? I don't know. I really do think for some people it's the best investment that they'll ever make. For people who wouldn't really make financial decisions anyway, making something in a market that is likely to grow in terms of asset appreciation is probably one of the best moves that they can do. So with that being the context, I'm not saying it's a bad idea at all, but I think it's sold as the only idea for most people to grow their capital and to have a secure life. As I say, under the realisation that people don't own their properties until it's fully paid off, and also under the realisation that it may not be as secure as you think, and although it might give you a level of overall financial gain as time goes on, it also does put you in a set of conditions where you have to adhere to, well, paying that mortgage payment and getting that house. Now, of course, we all want somewhere to live, and we all want somewhere nice to live, and we all want somewhere stable to live. This is where I think the benefits of mortgages come in. I think it's why people work so hard to achieve them. But in today's market, it's increasingly difficult anyway. And as we talk about things like straining so very hard to afford the payments, as we talk about things like increasing terms to 30 plus years, how viable is that under the guise of achieving market freedom? You know, we want independence, we want financial security, we want a very easy, or a relatively easy life. And then we're going to work every day. We can't miss anything. All in the aims to own this house. And then you get a house, right? So obviously I know people who own houses. I think everybody does. And then you look at what they're going to do with that house as time goes on. It's like, well, we're going to use it to pay off our retirement or stuff like that. Because bear in mind, by the time you've paid it off, if it's a 20-year contract, you're probably not going to be able to get into that until you're at least 30. Do the maths, and best contract that most people get will end at, 50, 55, and that's if they're lucky. So when it's all said and done, when everything's over, when you've paid it all off, what do you do with it? You sell it, right? You sell it, or you refinance it, or stuff like that. That's usually what happens. It's not all too common that houses get passed through the generations, and when they do, they often get sold. So you could say it's a gift for your child at that point. But it's working then for something that you won't see the rewards of for a very long time. And I understand it, and I know there's going to be people in the comment section going off like, you're at it again, you're talking nonsense about the fact that, you know, you can't work, you're lazy, all this sort of stuff. I know that's coming in the comment section, and that's fine. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm privileged in the sense that in the last, 5 years or so, I've tried a lot of different business ideas, a lot of different investment tactics and stuff like that. I'll say one thing that I can credit the stock market for is not something that I'm in anymore, the stock market, but it's one thing that I absolutely can credit it for. With almost all of the companies on there, you want to pull that money out today, you can. Let's say I had a stock market portfolio that I'm trying to pay into for retirement if I'm going down the same route as a mortgage. There's no minimum payment. That's not a thing. There's no set term. I can cash it in when I want to. And like I say, if I miss a payment, the account just doesn't grow. It doesn't disappear because, you know, they have to refinance the property, because it isn't a property, it's a different investment vehicle. And of course, I'm just giving one specific set example. Maybe it's not the stock market for most people. Maybe most people think it's too risky. But what I think, and people may disagree, and they always do in the comment section, that's fine. We are in the information age, right? We're in the information age. We're also in an age where the rights that we have are probably the strongest that we've had in modern times, right? We've got an awful lot of opportunities, and there's lots of things that we can do. I say this because if we're using housing as a investment, with the risks that come with it, of losing your capital, your equity, it's worth considering. With the amount of work that most people today have to do to keep up with the housing payments, it's also questionable. And I know the market is very unstable, right? So I understand both sides of it. Some might say it's better to lock in now at a certain price than stay with this madness and see what prices are like in 30 years. And they might say that renters will get left behind. And you know what? I don't actually disagree. As I say, there's a lot of advantages that come from a mortgage. Housing prices here in the UK are crazy for renters and buyers. But the good thing for the buyers is once it's paid off, it is paid off. Whereas for renters, it's also a constant stress. So I do understand it. But why is this another lifestyle choice that's forced on everyone or told as the ideal? Especially nowadays when it does not present the benefits completely that it may have done in the past. You know, like I say, a lot of people have to strain a lot more. It takes up a lot of a larger percentage of people's earnings, people's wages, people's payments. So it's more expensive to do. It does still come with the same benefits, I think, but I don't know, I think it's just one of these ideas where a lot of people do save up for years and years and years for mortgages, and we've seen the consequences of what happens if people can't afford it in the past, right? It's not a nice thing to see. And again, even if I've answered the question perfectly in the comment section, or in this video, let's say, I'm sure the next question is going to be, okay, so what's the solution? How do we get past this then? If it's that big of an issue when you think that buying houses isn't a good thing? Well, it's not that I don't think it's a good thing. I just think that it's probably an unaffordable option for most people, which makes me question whether it's a smart decision. Like, don't get me wrong, in the modern you will own nothing and be happy about it market, I think owning as much stuff as possible is good. Because again, if we own stuff, if we buy it outright or buy it, we have the opportunity to not have to rent it, right? When everything's in the hands of a certain few people, and then we have to rent it all, well, prices can be set super high, and we've seen that in certain markets. So I'm not against the concept of owning property, but why is it mission number one for most people? I mean, there's a good few arguments, so I'm not saying anything against it necessarily, but it's my mission, especially for people my generation and obviously younger as well, to hopefully bring a light onto a few of these topics and inform people as to the benefits and drawbacks. That's my intention. Maybe I'm wrong. It's all just opinion related, right? I'm not an expert in this sort of thing. And I've always said it, and I always will say it. My videos are based just on opinion. But there's a few things like that do make me question it. And then you think about, well, who benefits from us getting a mortgage, right? A really long-term mortgage. Well, they say that a good portion of the mortgage is paying down the interest, right? I've heard a lot of different examples for it. It depends on what rates you're on and stuff like that. But I think it's like, 5-10 years of a 25-year mortgage is spent paying down the interest. So if that's a bit of the context, banks and mortgage providers benefit hugely from our investment, which might be why it's pushed so much, right? I can't think of any other third party, apart from when things are on finance, that benefits so much from taking such a large cut. I mean, the concept of a mortgage, I think, is one of those ones that, I don't know, I don't see that many young people too interested in it. I think a lot of them think it's unaffordable, and the other ones seem to basically work very hard. So it's very much polar opposites in the people that I've seen. But I think in the market as a whole, people are questioning what their options are. The example that I always hear is that houses used to cost like 3, 4, 5 times wages or salaries. Now we're looking at significantly stronger than that. We're not in the same market for affording things as we were once. And that's a shame. The answer is probably to build more houses and find more affordable solutions, but it appears that those in charge don't want to do that. So with that being a bit of context, if we're in a different market, why are we thinking the same? So as I say, with wages being relatively low, with houses being extremely costly, is it likely that most people are going to be able to make it on a 20, 30 plus year term to pay something off? Are they going to be able to afford the cost of that, especially as the cost of living continues to rise? With that being the underlying conditions of today's market, does this concept of getting into a really, really expensive long-term investment actually weigh up anymore? It's a very horrible thing, and I don't like the concept. I really think everyone, like I say, should try and own as much stuff as they can. But we do also live in a market where it's not affordable to do things a traditional way. The initial solution that I'd think of as an attempt of getting out of things is looking for a way to get more money, right? It's one of these things where, well, how do we solve problems with how much mortgages cost? We make them affordable. And of course, one way to do that is to attempt to lower the price of houses, but that's not going to happen. So the only other option, I think, is to try and earn more money. And again, if we can do that, then mortgages make a lot more sense. But as I say, with the cost of living, what seems to be continuously increasing, with the cost of housing being already very, very high, and with the length of terms, again, looking to increase, or appearing to be increasing, what happens next? I don't know what happens next, and I'm not here with the solutions, but I think it's one of those things that's kind of crazy. It's a product, I guess, of the times that we live in. It's a symbol of the times that we live in, and I don't know what the answer is. I think it's a very, very difficult question. I've heard the option of people moving abroad. I've heard the option of people renting. I've heard the option, well, it's not really an option, really. It's just something that people have to do, living in shared accommodation or with friends and family for a very long time. And that's not good. That's not good at all. But what's going to happen next? That's the question, right? Because I don't have the answer, and I don't claim to. I don't have any clue as to what happens next. But I think it's really interesting that so many people set this in today's market, this unobtainable goal of getting into a house from a job. Because it's so expensive compared. Should there not be a middle vehicle involved? Something that helps you to afford getting into the house initially? Because like I say, whether it's some sort of an online business on its own, whether it's some sort of a business alongside a job, if the costs are so high and there's not much we can do to lower them, is the next solution not to try and increase our income? Which sounds easier said than done, but it's not impossible, is it? Maybe it's just because I'm inexperienced in the matter, but at the minute I'm not looking to get a mortgage, right? I'm quite young, and again, in my stage of life, I want to travel, I want to see things, and tying myself down to a job and a mortgage for the best part of 30 years doesn't make much sense at this stage. Maybe I'll look back in a few years and want to do it, or maybe I'll look back in a few years and say I should have done it. But for this stage, I'm not particularly interested, which is fine. That's fine. And I applaud anyone who is. But, as I say, different investment opportunities are available. The risks appear to be higher than in the past, and the future appears to be more unpredictable than it has been for the last, for the last while, we'll say. It seems like the last 4 years or so, the economic markets, the housing prices, amongst other things, appear to have, just gone wild. And does that cool down, or does it continue to rise? I don't know, but it's a big risk, isn't it? And especially if we're looking at putting a lot of equity into something for the next, again, best part of 20 plus years, is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? And can we actually afford it? There's different and potentially better opportunities for us to get a healthy or good retirement income in the modern day. Now, the one thing that I think housing, having your own property, cannot be compared to anything else in is the freedom once it's paid off, right? Once it's paid off, it's yours, which is an absolute win. That's a massive plus. Maybe that's enough to make it worth it. Maybe it's always been worth it. Maybe I'm just completely wrong. I'm just sharing my opinion, like I always say, right? My opinion is, it makes sense to have your own property, and it makes sense to try and own as much stuff as possible. But why is it so unaffordable? And why, with it being so unaffordable, do we just sit there and take it as our only option? I think our other options are look for other opportunities of investment, and also look for a way to increase your income, because like I say, it's not about sitting there and moaning about the fact that salaries are 25% lower than what they were however long ago and stuff like that. The solution is to increase those salaries or to increase your income. It's not impossible, and you can do it. But that's a subject for a different day. So let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm sure you will anyway. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't, that's fine. I just want to hear your opinions. So do share them with me, and I'll get back to as many comments as I can. Thank you, and again, see you soon. It was just my opinions, but let's see what you guys have to say on that.